right, presumably we are live. And if I'm lucky, everything is working correctly. All right, we are live and online. Welcome. All right, and welcome all. And for the recording, yay, my volume is up. Hopefully everything is working. We're going to get started right at 6 p.m. in just a few minutes. And I would say feel free to fast forward for 10 minutes because I don't know how to edit this stuff. But and if you're just joining us, I'm Bob Linde, or at least most of me. And we've got a special guest sitting in for Renee this evening. So we've got...
Use your feather.
I know. I'm without feather. I feel incomplete. So, although you can stay for the whole 10 minutes for the foolish antics as we stall for the next 10 minutes. Never a dull moment when I'm on camera with nothing I have to do. Hopefully we'll get a few folks to show up here. Yay, somebody's here. And feel free to let us know where you're from and who you are, because I'm not actually talented enough to see who's showing up into the group. We'll get started here in just a few minutes, right at 6 p.m. And needless to say, feel free to chat, type in any questions in the chat. Tricia is going to be monitoring for us this evening because Renee is out of town for the moment, although it would not surprise me if she jumped in to say hey. Hey, Tiffany, Brandy, yay. We'll get started here in just a moment. Thanks for showing up again. And I think, yeah. Was it Tiffany that I had a question from you that, like, so many things we can go on from that. So we may start it off with that one just because it's a nice simple one and vaguely relevant, although I'm going to have to talk about why I got a stupid eye patch on. I did not join the Mossad. Oh yeah, I got to scribble down those questions. Yeah, once it gets hopping, if we get a good crowd in here, it can get exciting.
All right. Get on here.
Woo woo.
Got some peeps.
Yeah, we got a couple people showed up. We'll get started. You're going to have to tell me when it's 6 o'clock.
Oh my gosh.
I can't read the clock.
Oh no. You have 7 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that
I'm going to let the herbs do their magic here until the last second. Then I'll jump off with the eye patch. Don't worry, it's not too hideous. I won't frighten too many people. By about 1 o'clock, I stopped scaring children.
I think that's a good story to open with.
That's
what
right.
happened.
That's what I thought. We'll talk a little first aid.
Yes. The events is under yours.
I don't know. It might be under me. There it is.
Here it is.
So if I'm lucky, I'm going to see another person show up there. Yay! And if you're really lucky, the chat will show.
It should have nothing showing.
Uh-oh.
I was thinking. Our internet's
I was going to say, I
each
think
other.
the internet is a little slow today. So if there starts to be some lagging on there, I'm going to switch it over to the phone.
Maybe I'll switch internet connections.
Ah, there you go.
Let's see. I'll do the 2G.
always a strange thing. It always seems like there's more people online than shows on the little thing. There's a little icon thing
Oh, yeah?
on there. And you're going to find there's a weird delay.
Okay.
So, in case I do anything rude and abusive.
I can just pause that.
Okay, it was you, Tiffany. I thought so. Oh, nice. And Tiffany, you're in Georgia, so I'm going to have some good suggestions for you for that, because you got stuff growing wild there, which is always super exciting.
Let's try it
I always
again.
think it's bonus when it's in your backyard.
The person with the neck.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Not cooperating.
No.
Well, why don't I
I
be...
can go on with my phone.
Oh, you don't want to do it from your phone.
I don't?
Chances are you're going to be typing more than you want.
Oh, okay. But I could just watch and see. Oh, because I have to type in.
Exactly.
It's really strange.
I'm going to go with a hotspot. My phone usually does a good job. What?
Both your profile and your cover picture.
Oh, yes. It's horrifying.
Hilarious.
Hotspot is on.
Okay.
It's plugged in. I'm back. I didn't run away. Y'all didn't scare me. Yay, I see more people. All right. There may be a glitch in the matrix here as I switch over to my phone so we can get a better connection.
Yeah, I can't get on here.
That's weird. I can steal our neighbors. I see somebody else's. And for anybody just joining us, we're going to get started here in just a couple minutes. We're going to get started right at 6 o'clock. I just always like to give everybody a chance to log on. And if we're really lucky, we have Trisha here helping us this evening to monitor the chat. Since uh-oh, you're
I'll
throwing
pick
things.
it up 'cause
Yeah, I
know
don't
that
stand a chance.
I can't find it. All right, I'm locked out of
All right.
your Facebook event.
Well, that's
Try again. Hosting, try it another way.
yeah.
Go live, but then it'll be both of us going live.
All right, I am still live. I still got people online, and I am hooked up on my phone now, so that should work a little bit better.
Maybe that's the
If you're just
issue.
showing up, let us know where you're from, and please put any questions if you got them in there. We're going to get started here in just a few minutes.
Maybe.
So weird.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think you have to say you're going to the event or anything.
Right.
Yeah,
you
it
just have
should
to
make a
click
difference.
on it.
It's all a mystery. Someday we'll get off
Okay.
of this.
Super strange. I'm gonna try one more time.
Maybe log on under you. That might be the
I don't know
glitch.
if I know my password. Let's see. Find out. Yeah, I don't think.
Hey,
I do.
Randy.
My password is stupid password 13 or something because I have to change it so many times. So let me.
All right, we got a good crowd
All
on
right,
here.
you're on here, and I will just
Just
watch.
We can always just shout out the answers or something. We'll figure it out.
Huge.
There's the typey thing.
There we go.
It's so bad. The depth perception is fascinating trying to do this with an eye patch. I'll explain the eye patch to all here shortly. If you're following me on Facebook, you may already know why. We were practicing first aid last night.
The bee turned you into a pirate.
That's
Kristen.
right. We tried to source a parrot. We're fresh out of parrots, although we did have a cool wig, but we couldn't find it.
And a feather.
That's right, yeah.
It's gone
So anybody who's just joining us, we're going to get started right at 6 o'clock, which I think is really soon. I can't see it.
now. 1 minute.
Okay.
You've got this.
Here, and I'm going to put up the selfless promotion. Oops. Never can find it. Yay. There we go. I think everybody can read that. Yay. You're on your own on the QR code. I don't know if that could work through like paper to camera and everything. It's funny. I was looking at it in reflection. I thought for a minute that like they spelled my name wrong. I was like, oh no. It's so bad. I think that's Dennis. Hey, Dennis.
Yes.
I'm going to resist the temptation. I won't read this whole thing, but there, I think I got it. The slow scroll.
You are right at 6 o'clock.
All right. I'm going to say it's 6 o'clock too, and it looks like we got a bunch of people there. So, hi, good evening, all. It's another exciting episode of the Open Herbal Forum thing with Bob, and we're sons Renee, and we've got Trisha. Say hi. Yay! This is when you email the school or call, that's who you're talking to. She's the director of the Traditional School of Herbal Studies, as well as one of our instructors. She does our anatomy and physiology for the herbalist, and we're plotting the overthrow of the herbal world with her teaching a few other exciting classes where she's like way overqualified, but to be announced at some point in the future, since we haven't solidified any of that. But if you don't know it, we're in St. Petersburg, Florida, and we have both a Western and a Chinese herbal program with lots of cool standalone classes. And we also have a clinical practice here at Acupuncture and Herbal Therapies, which is acuherbals.com. The school, you can find out more information at traditionsherbschool.com. Follow us on YouTube, Instagram, all the other cool places where occasionally we actually post stuff. For those of you who are just joining us, I don't normally have a funny looking eye patch on, and so I thought I would kick that off a little bit with, I'll talk about the classes coming up here in a minute, but hey, Chinese program is about to start in November. It's almost full. I think we only got like 3 or 4 spots left on
I think it's about 4.
Yeah, and the Western programs, the first in is just about full. So let me explain my eye patch, because that'll give us an interesting topic of discussion here as well. Trisha was teaching a class on anatomy and physiology. She was looking at the muscular system, and I was like, that one's boring. I don't need to sit in on that class. I'm going to go work in the school and work on the garden back there. We've got a ½ acre with a ton of medicinal plants that's a part of our teaching garden, and a little ceremonial circle and cool stuff. And it's summertime here in Florida. For those of you who aren't here, this is our rainy/growing season. So the yard gets a little out of control, since I am the one who primarily takes care of it. So I was out there with the weed whacker and the machete, and I was pulling up some of our motherwort had kind of already gone to seed, and I was pulling that out, and I was getting ready to knock off for the night and come in, when all of a sudden my arm and my face started to burn. I believe they were yellow jackets, but I'm not really sure. But I was pulling up the spent motherwort on the hill, and all of a sudden I got stung in the shoulder, arm, and eyelid. I was reconstituted into my track and field prowess, because I dropped that machete I was using and ran so fast. I think there were some fly things following behind me as I clawed madly at my eye, and ran inside and didn't want to interrupt class. So I started rifling as I held my eye, because I wasn't really sure what had happened yet, looking for the appropriate herbs to make a poultice on my eye. And all of a sudden, I hear from the classroom, "Is there a problem? Do you need help?" And of course, being the ignorant guy that I am, I was like, no, I'm fine. And luckily could find most of the herbs I was looking for, but I couldn't find plantain, probably the most important herb. I was too frightened to go back outside, because I thought the bees were out there with switchblades waiting for me to get something like the Spanish needle, the Bidens, which would have been probably my second choice. And if you check out my profile picture on Facebook, you'll see the lovely picture of the herbal poultice that I ended up with, and with a little help from some of the folks in class, they found the plantain, which I was vigorously searching for. And fascinating, I chose plantain, not the banana, but the weed, Plantago officinalis, yarrow, lavender, and there was one other.
Calendula.
Calendula, of course. And there's certainly many herbs that I could have chosen as well as those, but those were the ones that I could actually find with one eye and one hand. And dunked those into some water. Didn't chew them up as much as that would have been fine. Wrapped them in a paper towel and slapped them on my eye. And almost instantly, the hot burning pain that was piercing my face went away and did not swell so long as I kept that on my eye. And sat through the rest of the class and relaxed. And if I took it off, it got a little hot and burny. And so I just put it right back on. Got home and probably woke up in the middle of the night once to go, oh, this isn't going to be pretty when I wake up. So during the night, the entire eye, I could literally feel the fluids in there sloshing about if I turned my head on the pillow. And I woke up and it looked like I had done a few rounds with in a good Rocky movie, and literally could not see out of my left eye. It was swollen to the point of ridiculous, where it was very tense. Canceled my patients for the day, which was unfortunate. I had a moderately busy day seeing clients today, so I had to call into the office, cancel patients, mainly because I didn't want to scare them. And if I was doing acupuncture, I'm not sure I could have gotten my depth perception right with the needles, so I thought it was better safe than sorry. Called in a formula to the office. So day 2, swollen, not painful, just swollen, full of fluids. I had them put together a formula of Chinese herb Juhua chrysanthemum flower, which was probably my primary herb in there. We put in burdock and something else. I totally don't remember what the other herb was. Oh, she's going to figure it out for us. Huh? No, I got the Juhua, the chrysanthemum.
Witch hazel.
Witch hazel. Ah, yes, I wanted an astringent in there to close things up. And they had that ready and waiting for me when I got here to the clinic. Slapped it on the eye and felt immediate relief, reduction in it. And interestingly enough, it's funny, we had this conversation last night, the idea of for acute injury, hot or cold. Mm-hmm. And I actually used hot water with that. It was actually a hot compress. To kind of increase circulation to try to get that lymph and the fluids that had accumulated there out of my face. And, just holding it there was fine, but it was hard to get any work done on the computer holding this poultice over my eye. So I was really lucky that the comedic group text amongst the staff that Tricia had just happened to have an eye patch laying around her house and brought that in. And so, sorry, it's not scary. So it is 1,000 times better. And so what we did is we put the compress of the herbs under the eye patch, and it made for such an easy way. I could sit there and, it's so much easier to see things now. It made it so much easier to function, drive the car, work on the computer. I was putting together a PowerPoint, so I will leave my eye patch off. I am not going to run off and join the Foreign Service or anything with the eye.
Yeah.
But I felt very stealthy with that. And I was also reminded of the great challenges and one of the joys of having 2 eyes and providing depth perception, because I definitely missed my glass of water more than a few times today. So enough of first aid. I know I think it was Tiffany had an interesting question that let us know what'd she have to say. I know she typed a little bit in there, but I think it was kind of the same thing that she had on her email.
So job responsibilities at work have shifted, spending a lot more time on the computer. Some remedies you'd suggest for tense neck and shoulders.
Yeah. And so there's really common problems. I'm going to say I get my share of folks either in for acupuncture or in for even the herbal clinic, because I think there's so much we can do with the herb clinic. When it comes to, like, people come in for massage, I don't want to put the LMTs out of business, but when we start to look at either new job, new responsibilities, new work cubby hole, and even with the pandemic, I went from this really great office to now I'm working at home. And I have bad ergodynamics when I'm at home. My feet are up on the desk. I put a pillow on my lap. I set the computer. I'm just banging away on the computer, and it's not good for me in any way. So, one of the first things when we're looking at sitting at a desk, working at a desk, I think it's vital that we look at the ergodynamics of where we're sitting, how we're sitting, the height of our computer. I always tell people, and like right now I'm breaking my own rules. The computer's on the desk and I'm looking down at it, so my neck is going like this. So my computer should, sorry, there's a screen there. My computer should be here, so my head's in a more neutral position there. But since this isn't where I normally work, I just kind of take over the apothecary after hours to do this. So raising up your screen can be really helpful. Getting a ergodynamic keyboard, not working on a laptop like I am, and also things like a mouse pad and a trackball I find better than a mouse. With the mouse, we're sitting there hyperextending our arm oftentimes, causing some of that shoulder pain. It's a little bit of an adjustment, but get a nice, again, neutral trackball where you're just moving your fingers a little bit. And in another life, a million years ago, when the internet was new, I was doing a lot of HTML codey stuff where I would sit behind a computer just banging on the keys for 10, 12, 15 hours a day. And I ended up with carpal tunnel syndrome, and I didn't know what it was until I started dropping my coffee cup. I was like, maybe that's an issue. And all the massage in the world, although it felt great, was not helping it. And there was a couple things that I figured out that I had to do. One was I had to literally set an alarm on my computer. Okay, I'm old school. I actually got an egg timer from Bed Bath & Beyond and literally set this clicking egg timer to go off every hour, so that every hour I made it a rule I had to stand up for 5 minutes and change my visual distance so I wasn't staring at the screen. So I'd walk outside and do something. It didn't matter what it was. It could flap my arms, pull a weed, throw a stick for the dog. It really didn't matter. And that allowed for me to actually, even though I was stopping every hour for 5 minutes, it was allowing me a little sanity. My ability to accomplish tasks improved immensely. So I think that's really important when you're sitting parked. And it's funny, that was I've heard it recently, and I don't remember whether it was like the Surgeon General, but the new epidemic of chronic disease for us was sitting. That wasn't as bad as sitting around drinking a 2 liter of Coca-Cola. That the cardiovascular system, the lymphatic system, all of these things were actually going to be challenged by our lack of movement. And so literally just getting up and do a jumping jack, twist your body, do 3 yoga poses. It doesn't really matter as long as you're standing up and doing some sort of movement every hour or so. The other thing that I think is important, because new jobs are stressful. Oh, sorry that you're doing HTML,
She's
Tiffany.
doing coding, yes.
I taught myself that way back in the day. It was not my idea of a good time, but it was a good business. So one of the things, stress in general, and sitting there, I consider that stressful, sitting there typing code. It is not socially interactive very often. And one of the things that we forget is the importance of our B vitamins in our ability to have energy, to focus, but nerve function in particular, muscle function. And so normally I talk about B12 and our importance of B12 and our absorption and HCl and all that kind of good stuff. And yes, that's all true. But when we start to look specifically at nerve function, preventing things like carpal tunnel syndrome, any kind of nerve stuff, and I would go with the frazzled nerves, B6 becomes even more important. And so I generically say we all probably need a B complex. We live in a stressful world. When we talk about detoxification, we're talking about the B vitamins oftentimes. Nerve and brain and muscle function, B's. In the extreme, when somebody has something like carpal tunnel syndrome, I frequently will look for the potential for a B6 deficiency, and if there is, we may or may not be able to address it specifically through just supplementation. But here in Florida, yay Florida, we actually have the right to do vitamin injections here. So B6 injections in pericardium 6, which is 3 fingers below the wrist crease between the 2 tendons, is a nice simple place to do it. You can also do it in pericardium 7, which is a little further up. But that can be helpful and really turn around quickly, and ideally avoiding surgery. I oftentimes go to the B6 deficiency when I see bilateral carpal tunnel syndrome, which is basically both sides. Like, it's one thing if you're working the checkout counter and you're going like this all day long, and then you're only going to get carpal tunnel here. When you get it on both wrists, unless you're really talented at the checkout counter or moving the widgets back and forth on the assembly line, is a really good potential that it's actually the B6 deficiency. The other thing is when there's a nerve issue, and in this case we're talking carpal tunnel, we're looking at the variety of the nerves are passing through that tunnel that goes into the hand, that area gets inflamed. When those nerves are being pressed on, impinged upon, inflamed, for whatever reason, I love St. John's wort oil. So in oil that is infused with St. John's wort, and applied, I would say in an acute situation, twice a day for, I don't know, maybe, or prevention, once a day is plenty. That's a nice simple one, and we hear a lot of like, whatever you do, don't take St. John's wort. Topically, it is safe. If you are on 0 medications, to include over-the-counter and to include birth control, it would be safe to take St. John's wort internally as an infusion. But like literally one of our awesome graduates from years ago, she's actually just finished acupuncture school and in practice in Tampa Bay here. She's got a tattoo with St. John's wort on her arm because she has St. John's wort twins. That she was sure that she could never get pregnant. She was on birth control and was enjoying some St. John's wort, and oops, that was a problem. It wasn't. She has lovely children. Those are some easy ones. But Tiffany, just because you're in Georgia, the plant that ate the South, our favorite in Chinese, we call it gegen, G-E-G-E-N. But that's kudzu. And so the kudzu root in particular is, in Chinese medicine, we use it specifically for spasm of the neck, shoulders, and upper back. It's nice that it's ultimately, it's considered a soup thickener. It's a vegetable. It's hard to screw anybody up with kudzu. The only caution and new information for Bob is, turns out I got hemochromatosis, which is I'm the opposite of a vampire. I have too much iron. My body doesn't process it well. So guys generally don't need iron, and kudzu is actually a decent source of iron. It's very mineral dense, and it's one we forget about a little bit. So I steer away from things that are really high in iron, and still start, of course, leave it to the herbalist to end up with a genetic disorder that requires bloodletting. I need more leeches and more bloodletting in my life. That's the cure, or at least the treatment for hemochromatosis. No, I couldn't get some modern disease or anything. Sorry, talking out of school. I went to the doctor the first time in 10 years and kind of thought maybe I might have an issue with that. Kudzu, and it's funny, the kudzu flower, which is a beautiful flower, I think best tinctured fresh. You can use it dried. I just think it's so much better when it's fresh. Is really helpful for stress, especially in your case, Tiffany. You're going to be too long in front of the computer. Literally, that I feel like, because we're not seeing sunlight. If you're typing code, you're locked in a dungeon and typing away for 12 hours a day or more. That seasonal affective disorder, that lack of sunshine, we're going into the winter time. And I find that that's one of those herbs that I generally consider very safe, the kudzu flower, and it helps with kind of that melancholy, gloomy, kind of that stagnant, phlegmy, heavy feeling. We also use the flower, the Gugenhua, that's the Kudzu flower, for alcohol withdrawal as well as alcohol poisoning. It seems to help the alcohol process out of the body faster. And you said you were doing a kava oil or salve, which perfect. I think kava, the methysticum, or the Piper methysticum is just a phenomenal. I think there should be more massage oils and lotions and salves made out of kava. It is such a wonderful antispasmodic, muscle relaxant, nervine, that it can be challenging. Throw into that, especially if it's that upper body tension, if it's my sleep was terrible when I was typing code. I was literally like having nightmares about code, and I was running my own business, so that made it a little extra fun. I think magnesium is a wonderful addition as well. So the magnesium, just overall relaxation of the muscles. Taken at night, it can very much help with a better, more restful night's sleep without being like knocked unconscious. The trick with the magnesium, though, taking it at night, I think, is value added. You can take it any time of the day because it does help with the sleep at night. We want to get the right form of it, and we want to get not too much, because take too much, you're going to get loose stools. So the goal is to have the healthy, easy bowel movement in the morning. So I especially like it if somebody's tending towards constipation, hard to get to sleep, mild blood pressure, stress, maybe the blood sugar is walking that line a little bit, like that is magical. As a general rule, I don't encourage people to do the magnesium oxide, not because it's bad, it's just least effective. It really moves the poop well, but it doesn't do the other stuff quite as well. Magnesium citrate, a fairly common form. The magnesium oxide is one of the cheaper forms, so we see that in a lot of the poor quality supplements oftentimes. The magnesium citrate kind of does everything pretty good. It's a reasonable price, helps with the stress, the muscle spasms, the sleep, all of that pretty decently. If you're like, yeah, my poop is pretty normal, maybe even tending towards loose a little bit, a little soft serve thing going on, in which case then I would use magnesium glycinate. It's a little bit more expensive, but you can do a higher dose. It has a higher absorption rate and less negative effect on the bowels. So that one you can take and help with the stress. That's probably my 2 cents worth. I would also say it wouldn't be wrong, if this is a long-term job or profession, anything like that, you might look at things that are good for the eyes. And I would say any orange herb, calendula comes to mind very quickly, just to be protective to the eyes, nourishing to the eyes. In the Chinese realm, we would think about things that are nourishing to the liver yin, or the liver blood, blood tonics in general, even in Western. With the kudzu, for the melancholia, if you're able to do St. John's wort's great for the melancholia. Oh, I know what the other one is. After I read your question, it popped into my head. Oddly, black cohosh, and that also grows there in Georgia for you, depending on where you are in Georgia. But black cohosh is such an easy one to use. That, although it has a venting aspect, in Chinese that's shengma, we use black cohosh for venting rashes that haven't come to the surface. We always hear about it for menopause, and it's like, it's all right. I like it more for menopause depression, that melancholia. It's effective for both men and women, and it also has some antispasmodic effect. So black cohosh would be good. You could, you always have to be careful in looking at energetics. Very appropriate to add something like skullcap, but skullcap is more sedating, so more melancholia. Maybe something like rose. Rose is a nice, gentle, warming to the heart. You could look at holy basil to add with that. Any of those would really fit well into that. If you were looking at focus, Gotu Kola, the Centella Asiatica, would be really good in there. That works not only for brain and focus, But with the Gotu Kola, I always think of, I always got to remember that for any kind of inflammation of the connective tissue, so that kind of just like overall stress and tension that's not an actual injury, maybe not even knots, it just everything's a little inflamed. The Gotu Kola is such a nice gentle additive in there. But always make sure you're paying attention to energetics, that not too dry, not too wet, not too stimulating. And that's really looking about the individual and starting to formulate around their unique properties of hot, cold, wet, dry, deficient, excess, like we always talk about. I think that pretty much beat that subject to death.
I'm curious if she's stretching.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
And there's a YouTube video on this that I believe if you search for my name on YouTube and carpal tunnel, it should also be on our YouTube page under the Tradition School of Herbal Studies. And I will do my very best to demo it here. You guys get your own private showing for this. It was called the like I never had a name for it. It was a qigong warm up. But we took my Chinese herb students on a canoe trip years and years ago, and we have lots of little turtles here on the river that we were on, and they all like to sit up on the logs, and they all put their legs behind them for some reason. So this exercise is now called the turtle, and you can do this sitting or standing, doesn't matter. And it always, so many good qigong exercises. Hug a tree. So I'm hugging a tree, a big round tree, and doesn't matter which hand is out. Palms facing you about even with your chest. I'm going to rotate my palms. They're now facing out. And I got to back up for this so I can do it properly. And it's always hard. There we go. We're going to try not to hit you in the face.
Try not to.
And I always describe it as painting a semicircle with your thumbs out to the side. And then the more you lift up on your palm, the more you're going to become very aware of your carpal tunnel. This will be a really nice stretch. Palms back, arms back like you're diving off a diving board. Palms forward, arms forward. I'm going to do this. And so you can do that every hour when you stand up. I'm going to try to do this so everybody can see. Rotate, out to the side, lifting up on the palms, nice stretch. Palms back, arms back like the turtles on the logs, palms forward, and my arms forward. So that is my kind of carpal tunnel prevention. I also use that for folks whose shoulders are starting to round forward. We talked about the scapula and some of the rotator cuff last night in the muscular system for herbalists. And that's one of my favorite exercises to start to, when those shoulders are starting to round, people are like this on their computers all day long. We're all looking at our phones. In another 20 years, another 50 years, we're all going to have these necks that are way forward and our rounded shoulders. We're going to have the widow's hump. This is my favorite prevention. Also because it really causes a nice stretch in here. This is lung 1 and the start of the lung meridian, and we say grief is held here, and it opens up the chest, Ren 17, where we keep a lot of our emotions trapped. It is the front move of the heart, I think. And so that act of opening and stretching this up really helps to gently release some of that trapped emotion. We protect our heart and ourselves here, and that's never helpful long term. So that's a nice stretch for physical, emotional, neck, shoulders, as well as prevention for the carpal tunnel. I just talked for days on that.
That's good.
What else we got?
Good herbal mix for immune boosting.
I think that was Dennis. I think I saw that fly by. Mm-hmm. There's always a challenge for that. And obviously in the days of COVID here, that's a popular one. And I always start with, I don't know, what's wrong with your immune system? And so there's two, like we can actually say, ooh, there's blood work and my leukocytes or my white blood cells are too low, and that can be an issue. Where you can be on medications that intentionally suppress our immune system where we may not want to stimulate our immune system. So it's really important to see what's going on. And I think a lot of times when people say that, what they're saying is, I want to optimize my immune system. I want it to be as effective as possible, ideally to prevent our colds and flus. And I preach it from the rooftop, get your vitamin D levels tested. I just assume everybody is deficient. And unless you're a lifeguard and have been for the last 20 years, you probably don't have enough. Even though today was an unexpected day off, I spent most of my day inside today. I wear clothes the majority of the time. I'm outdoors or indoors, and so the reality is it's really hard to get enough sunlight. Our natural source of vitamin D. There's some food sources. Milk is not a valid source of vitamin D, but we do get some naturally occurring vitamin D from things like mushrooms. It is vitamin D2, which your kidneys have to still convert into D3 for our body's, our immune system and so forth to utilize it better. So I always encourage supplementation with vitamin D unless there's a reason not to, which I can't possibly imagine what that is. I always say 5,000 IUs of vitamin D daily until you find out what your vitamin D status is. I was saying that even before COVID. I say it even louder now that COVID's an issue. There's some really interesting research when we look to Israel and Italy, and even in the US now we're starting to find some research that shows that people who have a vitamin D level over 40 have less likelihood of long haul COVID, severe symptoms, hospitalization, or death. It's the folks who are under 20 are the ones who are being hospitalized, risk of death, and long haul. There's like very clear, when you look at the pattern on those research studies, there's like, it's a crapshoot between 20 and 40, but above 40 and below 20, it's very clear what's going to be happening there. I was happy I got my vitamin D levels tested recently. I was in the mid 60s, I believe it was. So I have not stopped taking it. I encourage all my patients to get tested. I encourage them to get at least above 50. Ideally, somewhere between 70 and 90 means you rock, that your bone density is better, your immune system's better. There's usually an emotional health thing that comes with higher vitamin D as well. There's some correlation between seasonal affective disorder, SAD. You know, when people who live up north, and that time is coming now, that we see shorter days, you know, even with daylight savings time. If you're up in the Northeast, if you're in Canada, Alaska, places like that, so many months in the winter time, you're going to go to work in the dark, you go into your office building or whatever, and you're coming out in the dark. And you do that for 40 or 50 years, and, you know, heck, even school is like that. So we spend most of our life not getting enough sunlight, and I think we see some real issues. And I think it's important to say also, anybody with more melanin than me has a harder time absorbing vitamin D. So melanin is designed, it's the darkening of our skin, that is a natural adaptation of our skin to protect us from those same rays that help to produce the vitamin D in our specialized cells in the skin. So anybody who is African descent, Asian, Hispanic descent, and Southern Asian in general need to get their vitamin D levels checked, and I would say generically might even supplement more so. And we see that with COVID, those people of color are more heavily hit with severe COVID. We're seeing more deaths in the Black community. And I think that has much to do specifically with the low vitamin D that's common in that population. The other thing, you know, it's a no-brainer. Mushrooms are your friend, all of them, except for the poisonous ones. No Amanita mushrooms for any of you. But when we start to look at the mushrooms, they have such a clear benefit for our immune system, and I would call them more immune modulators, i.e. normalizing our immune system. So the mushrooms, they're a food, and so by immune modulator, I think this is important because for somebody who has an autoimmune disorder, if you stimulate their immune system while they're in a flare-up of their autoimmune disorder, you'll actually make them worse. They'll feel horrid. Their immune system's already over stimulated and attacking whatever tissue state in their body. So we have to be careful in that particular case. Mushrooms, and I'm going to say, as far as I know, there isn't a mushroom you can't have, whether in flare or not, with an autoimmune. I use mushrooms specifically with people going through chemotherapy who have cancer. It has some anti-cancer benefits, but to raise the white blood cells, as well as red blood cells and platelets. They're phenomenally successful. Probably my two favorites to work with the immune system would be reishi and cordyceps, generally considered very safe. And I would say specifically for white blood cells, which is probably one of our main things we look at with your immune system, I use the cordyceps to help increase that. And with the cordyceps, it's not dramatically moistening, but it is somewhat moistening. So for somebody who's really phlegmy, super fatigued, loose stools, undigested food, you just have to be careful with the with the cordyceps mushrooms, that you don't overdo it with those. There's a number of blends that are sold out there from a variety of companies. They're all good. You're not going to hurt yourself with any of those mushrooms. And let's not neglect the fact that even button mushrooms have good research to show that they have a benefit for anti-cancer and immune modulating function. So I encourage people, eat your mushrooms, cook the heck out of them. Mushrooms are considered basically indigestible until they're cooked. And I would argue the more you cook them, the better. And if you really want to be a freak, mushrooms have the ability to accumulate vitamin D2. So next time you go to the grocery store, you get mushrooms from your local mushroom grower, leave them out in the sun for a half an hour or so before you put them away in your fridge. You will slightly, and I do mean slightly, but you will slightly increase the levels of vitamin D in those. You can get some benefits from a few vegetables, but it's so minor it's not worth mentioning. Dairy and milk is oftentimes touted as a source of vitamin D. That is fortified with vitamin D, so it is D2 and it is in a basically non-absorbable form. And I'm going to say for the people who need it most, those folks of color, they frequently lack the enzyme lactase that's necessary to process that milk. So they're creating inflammation by consuming the dairy, which is going to cause a whole new host of issues that is not offset by the benefits of the vitamin D2 in there. So sunlight's my first choice. Go to the beach. If you don't have the ability to spend the rest of your life at the beach enjoying yourself, I would say a D3 supplement would be your next best choice, and get your levels tested. Other stuff, you have to be careful with vitamin C, but I am a fan of Linus Pauling. I don't feel like we need to go as extreme as that, but supplementation with, I'm going to say low doses, 500 to 1,000 milligrams, 1 to 3 times a day seems to be very effective for a variety of immune and inflammatory issues. Astragalus is another biggie. That's Huang Qi in Chinese. It can be used as a single or in formula. I think it's phenomenal either way. It's not very useful as a tea because it's a root and it's a very fibrous root. So putting that in soups and stews is very normal. Bone broth, or boiled into a decoction. You can throw it in with your mushrooms and so forth. Atractalodes is another winner. Those were probably my big go-tos for all of that.
Dennis asked about
Lion's mane. Lion's mane is a yummy mushroom. If any of the shaggy mushrooms, we have them growing here in Florida. I'm sure as you go up north, I'm sure they're up there. I'm really good at wild harvesting my plants. I am poor to mediocre at my mushrooms. I know my couple of mushrooms, but shaggy mushrooms, which lion's mane is a type of shaggy mushroom, I'm pretty good at those. And so super yummy, getting them fresh, even dried, and reconstituting. They're wonderful in soups and stews. I've made almost a vegan Alfredo sauce with them for pasta. That's super yummy. And yes, it has immune functions. We tend to think of lion's mane, though, having a better effect for brain function and nerve function. So when I think immunity, lion's mane isn't on the list, but again, it's a mushroom. It's good for you. It's got the polysaccharides and all the other cool stuff that's probably of great benefit. But I think of making myself smarter with some lion's mane rather than its good effect on the immune system. So I tend to, just as immune stuff, reishi and cordyceps and cordyceps are my big go-tos, and then all of them after that. No, what else we got?
So segue with the vitamin D.
Oh, yeah.
Talking about mixing your vitamin D3 with K2.
Oh yeah, forgot about that. So it's funny. I have to call my ex-father-in-law because he just left a message on my phone about that, oddly, and so he's on my list. I don't know when I'm gonna call him. Maybe tonight.
You should.
Nice guy. So the K2, there is so much debate as to how we need to take K2, when we take K2. Opinions vary wildly. So I have, like, you're a fool if you don't take K2 with your vitamin D. No, you're a fool if you don't separate them by 6 hours. Honestly, I don't know, and I barely have an opinion. I think the K2 is important if you're taking the vitamin D specifically for bone density issues. Then I think it's important. I would say, when's the right time to take the K2 with your vitamin D? When you and the K2 is there. So I don't think it matters that much. I don't think anybody's saying, whatever you do, don't eat your kale soup in the sunlight. You can only eat it in the dark. And so the reality is, when we look at the natural sources for vitamin K, we're looking at our dark green leafy vegetables. It's why when people are put on blood thinners, they're told not to eat dark green leafy vegetables, because it goes contrary to what they're trying to do with the blood thinners. So I think it's okay to get a big old pot of greens and eat those out at the beach. I think that's a classic. We go to the barbecue, we eat our steamed and cooked pot of greens, and I don't think there's anything wrong with doing them together. Do you need it if you're just trying to keep your levels up and for the immune system? I would argue right now the research says probably not. I don't believe there's any detriment to having the K2 in there. I don't take K2, but I do take vitamin D every day.
I take them combined in a capsule.
And it's and a lot of the capsules have them combined. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I've never bothered to separate it. I will not claim to be an expert on that. I would say I'm pretty good at that, and I'm not rigid in the way I consume that. And I would say, for me, I'm not at a high risk of osteoporosis. I have been active my whole life. I've never had a lack of nutrition. I've had an abundance of sunlight most of my life. Spent more than 2/3 of my life in the South and in the Caribbean, out on a boat, getting plenty of sun. So I don't consider myself at high risk for that. You know, if some horrible thing happened in my distant future that I needed a medication that stripped the calcium out of my body, maybe it would be an issue, and I'd revisit that research. But as it is, I'm like, I'm fine. These days, though, I spend too much time inside, so I need to make sure my vitamin D levels stay up. And I think that really is, both are important. Eat your veggies for your source of vitamin K. That would be preferable. Eating, in particular, no shortage of dark green leafy vegetables. They are our friend. And dark green leafy vegetables, those cruciferous vegetables, your kale, your collards, chard, those should be cooked a lot. We need to break those cell walls open in order to extract the nutrients. For those of you who have jumped on here in the past, you've heard me say, like, what'd your grandmama do? Your grandmama did not give you kale salad. That's a very modern construct. You got a mess of greens, you threw them in a pot, and if your grandmama was really good, she started cooking them the night before. I don't think the fat back has to be in there, but it is awfully yummy. So probably a little vinegar to help break those down a little bit more and get those minerals into more easily absorbed minerals, that those are put in suspension, I think has value, and they're super yummy in the greens. So make yourself a mess of greens and then eat all the different colors of the rainbow with your veggies. But some veggies are fine to eat raw. but in particular dark green leafy veggies should be cooked, both to break the cell wall to get the minerals out, the vitamin K, but I would also say many of your cruciferous vegetables have a negative effect on the thyroid if done raw in large amounts over time, i.e. juicing. Sorry, I've seen that happen too many times, that 6 months of juicing your cruciferous vegetables will throw you into hypothyroid disorders. That's enough on that.
Okay. Goldenrod.
Oh,
Kristen
goldenrod,
has
yes.
made an infused oil of vinegar, honey. She has tinctures left from last year. What are some ways you use it outside of muscle pain, urinary health, and cat allergies?
Okay. So goldenrod it's so funny. It's a weed, literally. We have a dozen different varieties here in Florida, I think. It grows everywhere. Long history of using goldenrod in pretty much every tradition where it exists. And I'm as guilty as the next guy. I don't think about it even though it has this just endless number of uses. And every time I read an article or I'm reading one of the textbooks here, and I come across goldenrod, I'm like, I could have used that on that client. It's for some reason not in the forefront of my brain, and every time I have used it, it's been phenomenally successful. It can be done as an infusion, and I would say it should be done as an infusion, not a decoction. It's got some nice volatile oils. It's very aromatic. Tincture is totally fine. I don't think I've used it as a vinegar, but there'd be absolutely nothing wrong with using it as a vinegar as well. Glycerin extract, of course, to torture small children with, although I'm not a big fan of glycerin on general principle. Because it's so sweet tasting. I think we should savor our bitters and our sours and all the nasty flavors. The more we consume them, the more we'll actually crave them, I think. So it's always interesting, like with goldenrod, like literally start at the top and work your way down. It's useful for headaches, everything from sinus headaches to temporal headaches to occipital headaches. Occipital's back of the head, temporal on the side, and of course any of your frontal sinus headaches, both from getting rid of the congestion, so it's specific for phlegm. It literally helps to break that up, but also has a diuretic, so it can drain fluids off. So it can, the occipital headaches, the back of the head, tends to be a little bit more acute and oftentimes comes from anything from the headaches associated with colds and flu. It can help with tension headaches. I use it less for tension headaches, but it 100% can be helpful, especially in formula. I've used it for eye pain, both topically and internally. It's an anti-infective, so topically for any kind of road rash, anything like that, we can use it dried or fresh. So it's because it's so plentiful that we can find it in any open field around here, pretty much any time of the year. It's really an important part of our wilderness first aid kind of thing to be able to recognize it. Allergies, in particular, it's good for allergies if you can harvest it before it blooms. The pollen from that can cause seasonal allergies, but just like we see with ragweed, harvested before it goes into flower where it's releasing its pollen, I find it's very effective for hay fever kind of seasons, that seasonal allergy kind of idea. I've used it less for respiratory, but certainly when it's allergies and when you have kind of a wet asthma, it would be good. It would combine well with Sita, and I've used it in combination with other herbs in a bath for muscle soreness. but probably what I've used it for the most is edema. So any kind of kidney issue. This is a frequently forgotten and neglected urinary for everything. We actually, who was it? In student clinic Wednesday night, Crystal, one of our distance students, she actually was talking about a client that she was just starting to work with that had, I forget the actual languaging, they said not cloudy so much as like sandy urine, where it was like almost a paste that was coming. It wasn't paste. So it would be very specific for that. So any kind of urinary tract infection, kidney stones, this is a great urinary herb to add in there for that. So I know lots of people who use it as a single. I tend to always work with it in formula where it's anything that's trying to move excess fluid stuff out, it will combine well with. So it does really well with pellitory of the wall, does really well with cleavers, any of our sinus herbs, any of our kidney herbs, any formula you put together for kidney stones, this one would be a real winner. I don't know.
Kristen asked a sinus infection. Does cold
Totally, yeah. 100% it would be appropriate for a sinus infection. And I would say, again, mixing it with something else, something with berberine in there, some Oregon grapefruit. You could do the gold, like you could do a infusion of the goldenrod and use it in a neti pot. You could combine it with, I don't know, I always hate to say golden seal because it's almost too strong. It would combine well with magnolia, Oregon grapefruit, woad root it would do really well with, angelica it would do really well with. Man, I'll give you a couple ideas. Jinyanhua, golden yellow herb,
Not yellow dock.
No, it's a vine that has two colored flowers on it, and I'm drawing a grant. Somebody's going to remember in chat. Put it in the chat. The Jinyanhua is honeysuckle. There we go.
Oh.
I knew it was in my brain. And it grows where you are, Kristen. So, honeysuckle is such an underutilized plant that I think is absolutely amazing as an anti-infective, especially. It has many uses, but that one's always such a winner. I'm going to do a station identification because we got a few new faces on here, I think. So if you don't know it, you've wandered into this crazy talk. Son's the eye patch, but slightly swollen eye still from bee stings. I'm Bob Linde, and we have Trisha, our herb school director and anatomy physiology for the herbalist teacher and soon to be other stuff teacher. Not to mention cool yoga stuff.
Yeah.
But for those of you in the Tampa Bay area. But this is the Tradition School of Herbal Studies as well as acupuncture and herbal therapies. We have both a Western and Chinese herbal program. And the Chinese program is almost full and starts in November. The Western program, the Western Herbalism 101, is coming up fast, and that's the start for the Western program that goes on for 2 years. Both are clinical programs, and then we have a ton of standalone classes coming up from Herbal First Aid, which is a weekend intensive that is just fun because we do weird stuff. And we go everywhere from home first aid to wilderness first aid to time allowing, go a little bit into group first aid, i.e. things like protests and festivals and things like that. That when Renee and I teach that, we've both had our share of experience working a number of first aid events in that, and I think it's just fun. We've got, I'm sure there's some free classes coming up, but I don't know what they are. But we've got our medicine making series that's one night a month. We've got our anatomy and physiology for the herbalist, which is one night a month. We've got some Ayurvedic classes that are really with a focus on cooking and nutrition that are coming up next week, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, those are super exciting. We had such a great turnout for our first Ayurvedic herbalism and diagnostics class that Gray is teaching, one of our other staff here. It was just absolutely phenomenal. I sat in on it and just had a blast. What a great teacher. And then we've got some of the spiritual classes coming up. We have a crystal class coming up very soon in the next month, as well as the spiritual cooking is a 2 evenings in a row. You can do them separately, but they're definitely great together. All of our classes are both in person and on Zoom. For those of you who are further afield, please, please, please know that we would love to have you in any of our classes. And the only thing that's tough to do is, the clinical aspect of both the advanced Western and the Chinese program is more challenging, but we have a number of people who are being really successful in doing that. They're doing a great job. And if you're in the Tampa Bay area, I'm going to be one of 2 speakers at the Cavananda, one of the Bula Cafe. And there's an MD, Dr. Reddy, who is talking on psychedelic medicine. That I believe he's one of the first people to be allowed to use psilocybin mushrooms and doing research, been granted access to that medicine. I believe the focus is PTSD, but I think it might be more further afield. And I'm going to be focusing in more about the ins and outs of kratom and kava and their safe use, both recreationally as well as medicinally. So that one will not be online that I know of, although I don't know. It's free if you're in the area. It is in Seminole Heights, I believe, Cavananda is, off of Florida Avenue at 7, 8 o'clock. I'm not really sure. I'll be teaching that weekend and then jumping in the car and hauling butt up there. I've not been there before, but I've seen pictures. It is beautiful up there. So I'm really excited to be up there. And one of our graduates is the manager, so I'm always a pleasure to see her up there.
You got some avocado questions.
Ooh.
Can you eat the leaves? Can you eat the seeds blended into a smoothie? Is there any benefit to either one of those things?
Fiber. No, I'm just teasing. It's funny. Avocado. I have 7 avocado trees in my yard at home. Oddly, I don't think we planted any at the school. I'm gonna have to remedy that. We had avocado when I grew up down in the Bahamas, and it was funny. You had half the people. You had obviously avocado, yum, great source of healthy fats. I had half the people down in the Bahamas would tell me, like, you can't eat them. When I got here to Florida, most people would say it's poison, but the other half of the people down in the Bahamas thought that both the seeds and the leaves were phenomenal medicine. The seeds of the avocado, challenging to work with because that's harder than a baseball. And so unless you have a really good food processor, it will break the blades of most things. It is easiest to work with fresh and not dried. And I think of the seed as being a source for a higher concentration of essential fatty acids. And so very nourishing. I do believe you can do too much of it. I would say the same thing with the leaves. The leaves, I learned from some of my teachers down in the Bahamas that was used more as a cleanse. And I always cringe at that word, and yet that is a part of a lot of cultures. And so we tended to use that when somebody was getting swollen lymph nodes, that they had pain, especially if it was swollen joints. We would use that for things like gout. It was used, and it was rarely used by itself. We would oftentimes add either one or both of those into a decoction. It was almost always decocted, not used as a tea. And it would be put in with lots of other really crappy tasting herbs. So we were usually looking at bitter herbs. I've seen the seeds added into one aphrodisiac formula that I was familiar with down there. that some people had learned with the avocado seed in there. And that would make sense with the essential fatty acids that's necessary for healthy cell function and so forth. And most of your aphrodisiac formulas were not boiled, but were actually mixed in with a very high proof rum. Usually the sexual tonics were made in overproof. And so that would extract some of those components, break up that seed a little bit better. And the seed was put in whole, which is odd. Like normally you'd want to break it up and get a better syrup. Literally you'd throw a whole seed in there. And I think there was an element of doctrine of signatures to that, that a seed to produce seed idea. And so it was probably minimizing any potential issues with that. So I would say, I know that there's a lot of like, everybody oughta. I don't think there's anything that everybody oughta, except maybe drink water and breathe. After that, when we're looking at herbal medicine, and both the seeds and the leaves, I would say are medicine more than food. And it's one of the ways we always teach people thinking about how do we classify herbs. And we can say things that we can eat kind of in any reasonable amount because it's food-like. Stinging nettles is a great example. Any of our pot herbs. Carrots are an herbal medicine as far as I'm concerned. It's high in carotenoids. It's very specific for the eye. Blueberries have well-researched and many benefits. Oddly, almonds and walnuts are considered an herbal medicine, but they're also a lovely snack that I enjoy most evenings. And absolutely nothing wrong with, maybe the salt content of a nut might be too much, and as long as you're not eating 6 pounds of it in a day, you're probably fine. Then we've got those things that are generally considered safe, but in too high a quantities or for the wrong person might be an issue. And clove is a good example. It's a wonderful spice that in small amounts are lovely to cook with and create really aromatic sauces, can be added into soups and stews, ground into a powder, garam salam, I can't even say it. Ayurvedic sauce. I'm drawing a blank on its proper pronunciation. I have a pound of it at home. And then we have other things that nobody's sitting there snacking on avocado leaves every day, so it's considered more medicine. And I'm trying to, like when we start to think of herbs, poke, there's a toxicity to that, and yet can be used if done reasonably in the proper dosing, but for the wrong person or too high a dose, it's going to be an issue. Like you can do harm with that. And it doesn't mean it's a bad herb. It just means that that's herbal medicine only. There's very specific criteria. So kind of like where does a particular herb or a particular food fall on the spectrum? What kind of dosing can we do with it? And is it something we eat every day? Or is this something that we reserve for a particular time or situation or imbalance? And so I'd probably put those avocado leaves and even the pit, the seed, I would probably put in the if we need it. When it's appropriate, if we're low in essential fatty acids. Hopefully that made sense.
I'm gonna butcher question number 2.
That's
so
okay. Feel free to translate. You don't have to read it word for word.
Yeah. Experience with Baikal skullcap.
Oh, Baikal skullcap. Yes.
Skullcap. She said Buhner writes that it's like a general antiviral. What are the energetics? And then she also asked about
Houttuynia, yes.
Houttuynia, thank you.
I read all of those and I'm just like, crap, I totally forgot them until you start to say them.
I don't know what either one of those are.
That's okay. Actually, Yuxing, Yuxing Sao. I think I'm right. That should be Houttuynia. Let's grab that one first, and I'll give you the other one. So, Baikal skullcap and Houttuynia, very different animals, almost different uses, but phenomenal herbs in Chinese medicine. At least I think it should be like a leaf. Oh, and don't worry about it if you don't see it. Yeah, there you go. Let's get a glass of hot water with it. Oh yeah, this is Houttuynia. Yeah, it doesn't. We have this growing. We actually, so I think you found that you're in Carolina. It's not native to St. Pete. I think we can find it growing further up north, but it's very, very easy to grow here in St. Pete, and it does spread. Doesn't spread quite so vigorously as some things, so it's easy to control. It can be grown in a pot. Perfect. And I'm gonna see if we can get some of its namesake out, and then we'll make Trisha drink it.
Oh.
She doesn't trust
never
me.
ends well.
She will never trust me handing her a
Never.
plant to drink
Never.
again. I gave her some toothache plants, some spilanthes, and
Like the whole plant.
didn't quite tell her what was going to happen with that. And she looks at me with a funny look now when I start, here, taste this, see if it's good.
True.
So it's, I hate to say it, spilanthes is kind of like an herbal joke. So houttuynia is Yu Xing Sao, and I won't type that in here. Oops, helps if I hit the right button. Yu Xing Sao, which translates loosely as fishy smelling herb. So if you have some houttuynia growing, give the leaf a little scratch, and it's kind of like the seaweed down on the seashore. On a cool night, that it's not like it smells like dead fish or rotting fish, but it's like when you scratch the leaf and you smell it, you're like, I'm not sure if I want this, but maybe I do. And you're like, you want to nibble it, and then you're like, should I spit this out? It's very odd. Some of them are more aromatic, almost bordering on minty, and some are really fishy smelling. I find that it has a lot to do with soil and light. That seems to have the greatest impact on how smelly it is, and how fishy it is. I don't know. You get some stinky seaweed out of that.
I expected it to be like sulfur, and it's not.
No, it's not really sulfury. That's a dried herb.
I smell like it's kind of sweet almost.
Yeah, and it's.
I'm trying to think. It smells like something.
And it's tough. That's some old dried leaf.
Almost like hibiscus-y.
Yeah, and there's almost a reddish color that comes out of the tea. We'll see if we'll stir it up a little bit here in a minute and see if it comes out. Sorry, we can't really show it on TV or on screen. So it is a common soup additive. Like literally, that was put into summertime soups to cool off. It's considered to be a phenomenal antiviral, but yes, it can be used for that. The Chinese would tend to use it more for somebody who runs hot, maybe menopausal, maybe hypertensive, and would use that. Actually, it goes back to a question we had earlier, almost to strengthen the immune system a little bit. And so it's an oddball in that sense, that the dosage is yes. Goes back to that. Is this a food / herb, or is this a only powerful herbal medicine? I would say this is a food herb that is considered cooling, moistening, and nourishing, and would primarily be used for. You could add it into a cold and flu, where you had like a dry cough. A fever that got worse at night, constipation, fatigue. Yeah, those are the biggies. I believe it, if I remember right. I don't use it a lot. It's also used for dysentery, if I remember right. So hot, burny, smelly poo that comes on acutely. Always goes back to the poop, doesn't it?
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna try to. Can I steal your knife?
Yeah, it's peanut butter on it.
Yeah, whatever.
Okay.
I'm gonna see if this is here. Let's stir that up, and let's see what happens when I drain this off.
Computer out of
Oh
the
yeah.
way.
So not a lot of color. I probably needed to let it steep, but you can see it comes out a little orangey, and this is in my water glass, so it's being diluted because I had water in there. And the leaves themselves have, when there's a little reddish tint to it. Ouch, 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 ouch. That is still hot. And so there's like even a little almost.
Now I smell more of a fishy
Yeah,
smell,
there's a
so
little
like
fishy in there.
Before, but yes, I do.
Nothing like drinking a glass of fish. It's also known as fish mint, by the way. Not related to Yerba Santa. Although it wouldn't surprise me if in some culture there's many herbs called Yerba Santa. So the Yerba Santa that I usually think of, I should take that back. There's a type of mint called Yerba Santa, but also the Piper Ronton, the root beer plant, is also called Yerba Santa. So we think of very many saintly herbs, not just Santa Claus herbs. So no, it wouldn't surprise me if that's right. There's only 2 plants in the plant genus. Oh, I'm sorry. I went off on a crazy tangent. I was thinking Yerba Mansa. So there's Yerba Mansa and the lizard tail are the only 2 plants in an entire plant family, I believe. Yerba Santa, though, has many names, and I don't believe houttuynia is related to those, the most common ones that are called Yerba Santa. But I'm sure somebody calls it that. And I totally got sidetracked on what I was saying. Oh, that's enough houttuynia. So good one, but remember it's cold and moist, and so don't use that for a snot fest, coughing up lots of chunky stuff, unless you combine it with something that will counteract its moistening effect, like Baikal skullcap, what we would call Huang Qin, Huangqin. And it's so funny, like when we say skullcap, we always think of this nervine, relaxing, anti-anxiety, that it's great for all of those things. Hopefully I got my Latin name right on that one. Oh, yep, yeah. So, this is funny, it's a different cut than I'm used to. And so this is one of the Chinese yellows, and you can kind of see it. And so we use the root of this, where like the Mad Dog skullcap, and you can kind of see the yellow in there. Oh, and you can smell that and tell that that's kind of like a dry, acrid, cold herb. If you were to taste it, it's very bitter and acrid. It will turn my tongue yellow. I'm not going to show you my tongue, then you'll know too much about me. Oh, man, that's good stuff. That is horrid tasting. I think I'll wash it down with some fish mint. Of course, that'll be a fun combo.
It's a party.
So opinions vary. I actually say that it contains a small amount of berberine in there, so I use this. Well, actually, let me back that up. We have the 3 Huangs in Chinese medicine, Huang, and Huang means yellow. So we have Huang Qin, Huang Lian, Huang Bai. Huang Qin we say is for the upper body, so in the chest, and clears damp heat out of that area. So things that are really wet and hot, the wet stuff might be yellow or brown, thick, sticky, chunky stuff that you would be coughing up or blowing out of your nose. It might be fluid congestion in the chest, difficulty breathing, things like that. But you have to be careful because it dries that up. Then you can end up with what I like to call a concretion. Like if you've got a lot of snot coming out of the nose or coughing up a lot of snot, we just dry it up, then it's stuck on those lungs. So we need expectorants and things like that sometimes to get that out. We have Huang Lian, which is Coptis, which definitely contains berberine. and I think is an excellent replacement. I would say it's a better replacement even than Oregon graperoot for golden seal, and not as expensive, easier to source, commercially propagated, and so forth. And then Huang Lian is for the abdomen, from the bottom of the rib cage to the belly button. We use that as a digestive bitter. We use that for infection in the stomach and small intestine. And Huang Bai, which is below the belly button, so we can use that for urinary tract, and that's a philodendron bark from a philodendron tree, not the cool vine that you can grow as a houseplant. And the Huang Bai is for yeast infections, urinary tract infections, kidney, and so any kind of wet, heat, hot stuff there below the belly button. All of them can be used topically. It's funny, it came up in class last night. We were having the debate about ice or no ice, rice or not rice, when it comes to acute injuries. And I mentioned that you can make herbal ice. And so we usually use the three Huangs, all the Huang Qin, Huang Lian, Huang Bai, ground into a powder with some herbs that help with pain. And we put those into a salve, and use those to create an energetic cooling for a thing. And when in our dit da jiao and things like that, putting it in a liniment and an alcohol base, because the act of evaporation of the alcohol itself creates an extra cooling aspect to that hot swollen area. So it's a fun thing.
I asked something about recommended for COVID, but I don't know what.
So actually, I think that the Baikal skullcap would be a terrible. I don't know. There's many things that I like about Bruner. I don't like his herbal recommendations usually. I disagree. He's very research based, and I don't believe very clinically based, and I think has zero foundation in energetic systems. And although I love me some research, I think energetics should be leading our formulation, and I think it should be leading our approaches. And most of the COVID that I've seen is a very dry cough, where it's difficult to expectorate, in which case the Baikal skullcap, the Huang Qin, I wouldn't say contraindicated, but it would be such a minor player to not be necessary. There's so many better things that we could utilize. Although it would blend well with the houttuynia, with the Yuxing Sao, to counteract the drying aspects of the Baikal skullcap. So there is not thought. So here's where we get some interesting interplay between research and not research. So energetically, I said the Baikal skullcap was cooling and drying. It does a very good job of that. And so a lot of people go, the second they hear the word skullcap, they think nervine, stress, relaxation, and you may see it put into a formula that's for insomnia, anxiety, and things like that. It will only work if they have that anxiety because of excess heat and phlegm. If they have excess heat and dryness, it's likely to aggravate their anxiety and insomnia. So it'll work on a small portion of people. It will do a phenomenal job. We look at that heat aggravating the mind, creating that anxiety. If there's a phlegminess associated with that, or extra fluid, or swollen hands or arms, lymphedema, rashes in their armpits, anything like that, then it'll be magical, and it will fail miserably on everybody else. And so that's the magic of energetics, of how do we match this herb in with the individual that's in front of us. And research will never ever show us that. It's not done that way. It could be, but it's not. I think I mentioned that. So what do I use it for? I usually use the Huang Qin for infections in the chest or just upper body. You could add it into a formula for anything from hypertension to sinus infections. It would work really well. COVID, nah. Sorry, disagrees.
Fair.
What else we got?
So someone asked about the health benefits of hibiscus bark.
So
Dennis.
I gotta go back into the Caribbean archives. So it's really funny. We grow. There's a couple of different. We grow cranberry hibiscus here, and then we grow what's classically used in the islands for sorrel tea. Whose I can't believe I can't think of the species name of that one, but it's the one with cranberry hibiscus has the beautiful red blooms and a red leaf. The Jamaican Sorrel Tea is another hibiscus, has the beautiful red flowers and a similar calyx, but it has a green leaf. And so classically the sorrel tea is made out of the one with the green leaf, red flower, really sour flavor. It's harder to grow here, not that much harder, but it's a little bit harder. It likes a little bit further south. The cranberry hibiscus is a regular weed practically here and even further up north. I know it grows at least Gainesville, if not further up north. So we love to put hibiscus leaf and flower in both to cover up the flavor of all of our nasty herbs that we like to give people. It's a cooling, moistening, refreshing tea. Sorrel tea is, I won't swear to this, but I think it's the national drink of Jamaica. I think rum probably should be, so maybe a little rum in with your sorrel tea. I would argue that you shouldn't add sugar to it, but people frequently do because things like flavor most people are frightened of. It has a kind of a sweet tart flavor, sour flavor that's associated with it. And we generally look at people who have a dryness and a heat in their upper body. So that might manifest as anything from heart palpitations to insomnia to night sweats and hot flashes to a dry red tip to their tongue with very little coating. It is specific for sorry, I'm still sucking on that bite called skullcap, and I was just like, why is there such a strong bitter flavor in my mouth? And I can't talk because my mouth is so dry. That would be the damp heat that it just got out of my face. Probably helped my eye.
Right.
So it's funny, here in the clinic, as an herb of commerce, we can only get the leaf and the flower. When we harvest it ourselves, especially the cranberry hibiscus, we pull the calyx, which is kind of after the flower's gone, it leaves what's got the seeds in it, the seed pod. And you're 100% right. For the stronger heart medicine, and we use hibiscus specifically for the circulatory system, we think of it for as a nourishing herb that is specific for like easy bruising, the capillary fragility, low vitamin C, the gums, like if you're brushing your teeth and you're spitting out a mouthful of blood, it's oftentimes your toothbrush is tearing the gums, things like that. Hibiscus is great. Congestive heart failure, where it's just like your heart's not pumping, but there still seems to be a little bit of heat. Leaf and that calyx is great. Classically, if we were treating more serious disease, we would actually use the stem, the bark from the stem, and the root was considered the strongest medicine. And although it still had the some of that sour properties to generate the fluids and so forth, it would also start to clear some excess heat out of the body. So we might look at it for something like gout. We might look at it for cellulitis, like an infection of the of any part of the skin and circulatory system. We would use it for a minor or suspected DVT, deep vein thrombosis, where things were getting hot, dry, and stuck, right? So there's blood clot frequently in the lower body. And obviously DVTs, go to the hospital. That said, the strongest medicine is the bark and the root. It's just, you can't actually buy it anywhere. You have to grow it. It's very much a strong island medicine that your root doctors were probably the only ones who would use it. That wasn't what the average Joe on the street would use. You'd actually have to go to an herbal medicine market, or you'd have to go see a root doctor in order to get that. And it sucks to have to like dig up your really good hibiscus plant for that. And I would say those two are the strongest, because all your other hibiscus are cooling and moistening, but they don't have that sour aspect that increases the generate fluids aspect, as well as the tightening, tonifying, holding things together part of keeping the blood inside the blood vessels and so forth, reducing the inflammation that might be there, and moistening and nourishing in the process. So great question. I don't think I've ever been asked about the roots and barks, but that's strong medicine.
Good for the next one?
Sure, go for it.
All right. Dongshin, codonopsis, energetics, and how to use it.
It's yummy. Codonopsis. And I've got Dongshin sitting here somewhere. Is that it right there? Oh, one of these. Yeah. So, and actually, let me make sure. Okay, you spelled it right. Good job. So there's Dang Shin, and then there's Dan Shin. Though the only difference is a G. The Dang Shin, the codonopsis, is okay. I know you don't trust me.
I don't trust you.
But taste this; it's good.
Okay.
This is a lovely snack. It's a root. It's a little. Well, get some. Yeah, get some water in there. It'll be sweet and yummy in a minute. It's herbal candy almost. So, the codonopsis, we consider it a chi tonic. It is specific to the spleen and lungs. And when I say spleen, I don't mean your actual spleen. You can take that out, throw it in the trash. Nobody cares. When we talk about the spleen in Chinese medicine, we're looking at, once it gets soft, it's good. There's a sweetness to it.
It's not a jujube date.
It's not as yummy as that. No. But there's a distinct
it's
little.
Not terrible.
It's not licorice.
No,
yeah.
You tricked me. I expected candy, but
okay,
it does
sorry.
have some sweetness. I'll give you that.
Some of it's more candy-like than others.
It's not. I'm trying to think the word with A.
Every once in a while, we get one that literally tastes
Yeah.
grossly sweet, and it'll have like little black, almost syrup
Gotcha.
that's sticky
Oh,
on it.
that would be nice.
So the Dongshin, the codonopsis, when we talk about the spleen, we're talking about the digestive system. We're talking about the immune system, our ability to metabolize foods. Sorry, there's a dog at the door. He knows he wants to come in here. I know. I'm going to go get the dog. So many distractions outside our window here in the apothecary. And it helps with our fluid metabolism. Codonopsis is oftentimes talked about as a replacement for ginseng, sometimes referred to as poor man's ginseng. I think it's a terrible replacement for ginseng. Where ginseng is, both Chinese and American ginsengs enter all of the meridians and affect all of the organs. It really works on longevity, with a focus on the kidneys, what we would call the essence or jing. That is such a specific thing. The codonopsis is working on a more focused aspect, and although I would call it moistening and nourishing, it is not as nourishing and moistening as ginseng. It used to be, and we would, all the textbooks always talk about use 2 to 3 times the amount of codonopsis if you're going to use it for a replacement for ginseng. And that used to be financially viable, but now everybody's tapped into codonopsis. A lot of the herb teachers talk it as an adaptogen. I don't find it to be that. Where ginseng I consider an adaptogen. The codonopsis, I'm like, whatever. I literally will snack on it if I forget to get lunch or something. So now the price has gone up because it's less common. I used to be able to get roots as big around as my thumb, and now I'm lucky to find a piece the size of my pinky. And so demand is increased, so the price went up. It's no longer a viable replacement price-wise, which was the big argument for it. So now you might as well, for a little bit more, you get the actual full benefits. If you're only working on the digestion, then it's fine to use that. But I rarely replace it. I personally, I think ginseng tastes good, but there's a slight bitterness to ginseng that I don't think this has that bitter back flavor. So if you were making children's medicine or something, it's fine. Children generally have good essence, good kidney health, but they tend to have lousy digestion. They're puking all the time, boogers falling out of their nose. So I think this is better for children, and it tastes a little bit better. And I want to say, and let me say, and I've said this in a few of them, but you never know who all's listening, so I want to make sure everybody hears it. The term tonifying varies if we're talking Chinese medicine versus Western herbal medicine. So tonifying in Chinese herbal medicine is actually about nourishing and building. Tonifying in Western herbal medicine, in a lot of the ways it's taught, is more about tone or increasing the, improving a lax tissue state, or toning or strengthening, which sound really similar, but one's nourishing and building, and one's strengthening and creating the tonicity of a tissue. So something might nourish and tone, but something like codonopsis, I don't think of it as toning a tissue state so much as nourishing. So I always have to like differentiate. Like when somebody says, "Is this tonifying?" I got to go, "What's your background?" And like, I know yours, Kristen. So you've heard me babble enough. It's one of the challenges of herbal medicine is our languaging, that we are constantly, because we use terms like blood cleanser, alterative. Like, you tell that to an MD, they're going to laugh at you. It's like, your blood's fine. It doesn't need to be altered or normalized or cleansed. That's why we have organs, and yet we do see energetically changes when we do things that are alteratives, when we use some of those cold bitter herbs, or those normalizing or herbs that help with tropho-restorative action and so forth. And so one of the great challenges for us as herbalists is to be as precise in our language as we can, so that we can talk with other professions or other herbalists to be able to understand, like a Western herbalist and a Chinese herbalist and an Ayurvedic herbalist. We all say the same stuff, but we say it with different language that we may not understand it. And so making sure that we clarify the point that people are coming from, and doing our best to at least, when you go to a foreign country, you should always learn whatever language they speak there. You should know thank you, please, and where's the bathroom. Those are the most important words in every language. And so if we're going to speak to somebody, I don't know Anani Tibbs very well. I don't know the Greek system as well as I'd like to. I know Chinese and Western really well. I'm continuing to learn Ayurvedic, but I'm not completely conversant. But I know enough that I can find the shared language and grounds so that we understand each other. And that's what we want to do in every language. Western medicine, the same thing. I change my language to speak to a medical doctor or to a nurse because they have none of that energetic language in their persona. They do, they just don't know it. They look for red color for potential fever, sweating or not sweating. Those are things they just translate it into a more medical word, rather, especially in their treatment approaches. They don't know it, but antibiotics are cold and they give it to infection, which is hot. Don't tell the doctors that, though. They're doing energetics whether they believe it or not. What else can I say about codonopsis? Man, that's it. I only use it occasionally. I'll put it with that, but nothing wrong with it. It does not do well in an infusion. It should be decocted. It's excellent to add into congee or khichdi, bone broth. especially if there's bloating and upset stomach. So like if you're trying to recover from food poisoning, it would do well, but I would probably not do it for recovering from major surgery, blood loss, cancer. I would probably go for the ginseng if I was going to do that in there. Somebody had asked something about mullein. Did you see the mullein question?
It just said, what about mullein? And it's right behind you,
Yeah.
I think.
Mullei's cool. So mullein is a really good plant. It's a biennial where it'll die off after 2 years. As you move north, it'll die back. The leaves are the part that's most often talked about. It's as many plants are called Indian tobacco. It's called that sometimes. It's a tobacco substitute. If we're doing smoking herbs, it's the base of most of our smoking herbs. And there's debate as to its energetics. You'll find a lot of things that call it moistening. When people translate it into Chinese, yin nourishing, specific for the lungs. But if you've ever felt a mullein leaf, there's a love-hate thing. It's like, oh, it's soft. But if you actually make a tea out of it, that soft hairs are actually irritating to the lungs, and so it causes, if you have some stuck dry phlegm in the lungs, it tends to break it up. And I think that's where the moistening idea comes from. We'll use that, like for somebody who's already smoking substances. I won't give a smoking blend to somebody who's not a smoker, but if you're already smoking cigarettes, if you're smoking other plants, to do something like the Mad Dog skullcap, the Western skullcap, and mix that with some mullein for acute anxiety attacks, it's phenomenal. If you have somebody who's trying to get off of tobacco, to start cutting their tobacco with things like the mullein, things like the lobelia to help fill those nicotine receptor sites, actually can be a really effective way to get people to change, to get them away from the physical addiction of nicotine, but they're not ready to give up the habit of smoking. Then I think it's great. My favorite, there's two other things. The flowers, they have these beautiful, delicate yellow flowers that come out of this really long flower spike. The flowers can be used to soothe inflamed tissues and is a key component for ear oil, where they do an oil infusion of St. John's wort flowers, mullein flowers, and garlic is your classic ear oil formula, and that's used for otitis media. Also, the seeds, it's so funny, you'll actually find reference that will say this, that mullein is poisonous. It's not. Yet, the seeds of the mullein plant have a toxicity and is the same chemical that we find in beautyberry, that is a paralytic to the, and there's another plant, I'm like, drawing a blank on the other one. The seeds contain the same rhodinin, it's RHO, and I forget the rest of the word, sorry. Gotta Google that beforehand. That chemical is used to cause a paralysis of the gills of fish, and that they'll float up to the surface, and you can scoop them up, and they're not poisoned, they're just paralyzed. And it's one of the ways that we can dam off a piece of a river or a pond, gather up the seeds. It sounds like a lot, but literally, if you've ever had a 6-8 foot stalk of mullein, you could put a cloth or a banana leaf or something around the base of that and just shake it, and you would have handfuls of those seeds. Mashing those up with a little bit of water to create a mash, for lack of a better name, and then moving that into your walled off part of the pond, those fish will start to float up. And if you left them around, you can cook them up and all that afterwards. So, and then the roots and stems are used to align the spine and the sacrum. So we can use the mullein root and stem both as a guiding herb. I would say the root is best known. I tend to use it for the lumbar sacral region, and then the stem, which is very straight and literally it looks delicate. The flowers and everything is so delicate. You could sorry, I am such a smartass. I used to work for Greenpeace, but every time I talk about how rigid and straight and strong, I always talk about clubbing baby harp seals. I apologize for that, but it's a Greenpeace joke. I apologize, and I can't help myself. So it is literally like an iron bar and very straight and strong. You have to get like a saw or clippers, like hedge loppers, in order to cut that stem. That I'll use that for the thoracic and cervical spine to guide specifically to that. But also, I've literally had people who've had a disc out of place, a vertebrae out of place, giving them 1 or 2 droppers full of the mullein tincture of the root or stem. Literally seems to shift it. They can stand up straight. It's absolutely amazing. I think that's all I got to say about that.
Can you speak on ginger and turmeric leaves?
Oh yeah, like here in Florida, throughout the Caribbean, certainly, it's so easy to grow ginger and turmeric. Like, what is it? It's September, end of September, so it's almost time. Like this year, especially, we had such good rain for like the last 2 months. It's been great. If you're lucky enough to be growing turmeric down here, the flower blooms on there are just stunning. And I used to be really excited if I had 1 or 2 flowers on my plants. This year, I'd say more than half of my turmeric plants, and I have many, had flowers. And so the flowers, stunning, smell wonderful. They've only got a couple weeks where they're really vibrant. So I can tell the leaves of my turmeric are starting to darken a little bit. The edges of the flowers are starting to wilt, and they're getting ready to die back. We kind of have a cold front. It's dry out, but it's not cold yet. I saw next week it's starting to hit like 70, maybe the high 60s at night next week. I'm super excited for those of you who have suffered through 4 months of our lovely summers here. Like that first cold front that makes it here is just time for celebration and outdoor fires. So that's once those plants, and so every winter, that first cold front, maybe the second cold front, the aerial parts will start to die back on the turmeric. That's when we harvest the roots. You can dig them up, and what started as just one little broken off piece, now you've got a whole hand. You can just rinse the dirt off, plant one piece back, and the rest you can dry, you can use fresh, and so forth. So what everybody forgets is the whole plant is good medicine. It's funny, I've got cardamom growing, I've got ginger going, a couple different kinds of ginger, a couple different types of turmeric, a couple different types of cardamom. The leaves are very aromatic, they just don't have the same properties. So I think it's phenomenal to take those leaves and either add them to rice. My favorite though is to wrap fish in it, put it in the oven on bake, and add some coconut milk and some other carminatives or digestive spices in there. Just think pumpkin spices, a little cinnamon, and wrapping it in those leaves. There's a cool French word for when you like wrap it up in a little paper pouch, but you can do those with leaves. It's a very classic Southeast Asia / Filipino to put rice inside of banana leaves. Just as common, even though banana leaves are plentiful, but to use things like a cardamom leaf, a ginger leaf, or so forth, and to cook your fish, to wrap your rice into those, and again, coconut milk is a common additive. So I primarily use those things in cooking. In case you can't tell, I like to cook, and I haven't had dinner yet, so I'm just all thinking of all the fun things I can cook. The cardamom and the ginger probably I use more than the turmeric. The turmeric leaves are not as flavorful. That said, we think of ginger and turmeric are both anti-inflammatories, and yet they're very different. So Ginger is a warming anti-inflammatory, and turmeric is, it depends on the type of turmeric you have. Some are slightly warming and some are slightly cooling. We talk about that the turmeric leaves move chi and blood. So when things feel stuck, when they either the pain moves around an area or the pain hurts when you press on it, I would actually put together maybe a poultice or a liniment or a salve and then wrap a turmeric leaf if it felt like that hurts when you press on it, stuck. Even traumatology would be super appropriate. I would use the ginger leaves to wrap a chronic pain that feels better with heat. So if a heating pad or the sun feels good, I would use the ginger leaf for that. There's also different types of ginger. The awapui, which is the shampoo ginger. Not the leaves, but it has these really beautiful blooms that come up on the awapui. And besides, it smells nice. You can wash your hair. It's a hair conditioner. That one, the flower and the juice that's in the flower, which is almost like a thin aloe. That's very cooling and anti-inflammatory, and so I've used that for acute bug bites, sunburn, any other first or second degree burns. That awapui would be very cooling, moistening, a lovely emollient. Throw out my $5 word for the day.
We other questions, but
Yeah.
Samaya, with the ginger, do you know any of the metaphysical properties with the ginger leaf?
So the ginger, sorry, and my hesitancy is like, no, I very much know how to use it, and I'm just like, how do I articulate that? That's always, the metaphysical stuff is hard to articulate sometimes, and I am challenged because although I work in the metaphysical realm, I do it less so than Renee does. But the crossover of energetics and metaphysical are so similar. And so we've talked, and I'm cheating, half of y'all have been in class with me, so we talk about wind and evil wind, and we see that concept of disease traveling on the breeze. Bad air is something we see in Central South America, in the traditional cultures in Mexico. The idea of bad air, the Chinese, we talk about the xie qi, the evil qi, which is associated with wind. And that same wind, that bad air, is where negative evil spirit kind of ideas come on, and so that's where we start to see this correlation. And that the old gypsy grandmothers would say they got a chill, and that was somebody was giving them the evil eye, they were casting a spell on them, that a fright would oftentimes have a cold chill that comes with it. We all know that ginger juice, ginger tea, and ginger leaf has a warming diaphoretic, make you break a sweat if you drink enough of that. So when we start to move that into the metaphysical, we can still say you have an evil cold invasion. Somebody has put a cold, they've touched you with death, and that's a cold feeling, a cold finger. Has reached out and touched you. We can use a warming diaphoretic like ginger for that. But when we start to talk about the ritual bathing, the limpia, to wipe off the badness that's stuck on you, if that's a cold evil that's holding onto your back, that's gripping your neck, gripping your shoulders, the occiput where they invade through, we could do a limpia with the ginger leaves, and that would be this stimulating as we wiped you down with those leaves and beat you with the leaves, whatever. We could make a literally infusion that we would then wipe you down doing the limpias. And I would say because the leaves have a warming property but less diaphoretic, you would probably have to add some other stronger aromatics with that in order to be successful with it. They would combine well with the Yerba Santa, we mentioned that earlier, which would be the Piper Arantan, the root beer plant, the false kava, because that's very much for wiping the shit off of you, the cold shit in this case. How'd I do, Samaya? Was that all right?
I said yes. Question about Biden's.
Mm-hmm.
Energetics, and also, do you find a correlation between Biden's and high blood pressure?
I would say not causing it. It's funny. The Biden's alba, and I would say Biden's spa, any species of Biden, Bipinetta, Pelosa, blah blah blah. All the Bidens are good, and there are many. I used to say there was 2 Bidens here in Florida. I was reading an article from one of the University of Florida, and I think I saw they were saying there were 7 different species of Bidens. The other ones were very rare. It was Biden's alba was our primary. You can find a lot of information through the Chinese Xin Feng Sao. So Biden's is used in the Chinese. It's in our Medica book for Chinese medicine. Bensky and Chen, I believe both. And you can certainly Google the Chinese name Xin Feng Sao. There's a couple of other names, but that's the most common. And it would be okay for mild hypertension. So hypertension, high blood pressure is usually considered a type of heat. It can be other reasons as well. And it would do all right for that kind of borderline slightly if there's heat as the cause. There's research out there using it for leukemia, chronic malaria, arthritis, a variety of types of amoebic dysentery. But I think what's important when we talk about Biden's, for me, my classic, topical spit poultice kind of idea, chew it up and slap it on a bug bite, minor abrasion. So we see it has some antimicrobial properties internally and topically. What my favorite use, besides just like it would have been a great addition for my bee sting last night if the bees weren't out waiting for me. My favorite thing to use it for is that lingering cough after a cold and flu with clear to white phlegm. And basically a teaspoon to a tablespoon chewed up fresh will usually rectify that cough within 15 minutes. And I'm going to go with 80% of the time it works like a champ. And used it for young kids. The youngest I've used it on is 2 years old. I haven't used it on younger because I haven't had the opportunity to torture a younger child than that. And with a 2-year-old, we made it as an infusion, as a tea. And just for compliance, that was going to be better than chewing up yucky weeds. That said, I don't want to limit it. It's good for any type of cough. And it's generally considered cooling, but not, it's funny, the book's oftentimes listed as cold. I think it's cool because I use it with that clear and white phlegm to such good success. And yet the Chinese classically drink this in southern China and Shanghai. It's like served in the tea houses in the summertime because it's so hot and humid that they use that to cool off in the summer. Like literally that's one of its primary uses in the textbooks. And so I've really tried to create a new understanding on how Biden works. I think about Biden's a lot. I don't sit with a lot of plants. I sit with this one all the time. And I think that there is a downward energy to it that we don't talk about. And I believe that that's why do we get a lingering cough? Why is it, okay, I was sick, I got better. What's this nagging crap that's hanging on, that's just weak, irritating? It's not even that weak. It's just, sorry, I'm not sick. And that goes on for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And I think it's when we got sick that it somehow disrupted the normal flow of energy of the lung qi. And so I think that it's actually, and sorry, Bob using crazy Chinese words that sound cool. rectifies the lung qi, i.e. normalizes, and so we could, it's creating a homeostasis to recreate its downward action, and that action is what's helping the fluid metabolism that in Chinese the lung helps. That lung qi is supposed to be going downward. We say that going, if your lung qi is going up, you're coughing. And so that's not what we want. We want it to go down. So I think it's helping create that connection. So I've used it for all kinds of off-label stuff from that idea. I've used it for prostatitis and enlarged prostate, that it seems to have a value. Again, it's helping with a phlegm and a heat component where that's starting to get stuck in the prostate. It's not, it's not as effective as things like the nettle root and saw palmetto, but it's super effective to add that in. And here in Florida, at least, the price is right because it's free. Not if you come to the clinic. You should go out and pick it. It's free that way. We'll charge you money here because I had to pick it for you. I always am challenged when people are like, I want to buy some Bidens. I was like, I will show you what it looks like right now. Go find this in Europe. They won't do it. I was like, free money. So I'm okay with that. It's like, I got to pay the rent somehow around here. And our time is running short. I see vitiligo.
Can of worms last 5 minutes.
Yeah, right. Vitiligo is one of those things that I have had the least success with, and I hate saying that. I like to say I have 80% success rate with everything. Sometimes better. Vitiligo, meh. I find that vitiligo, food sensitivities oftentimes have a role in that. Malabsorption has a role in that. Gluten has a negative role in that. I usually look at some of our classic good for your skin herbs, things like burdock internally, even externally, smilax internally, but and then I'm just going to generically say nourishing herbs like chickweed and cleavers because I got to say it all in the next 3 minutes. The secret to success for me, those times when I do have better success with it, or at least see some improvement, some reduction in growth of the vitiligo, I add rosemary. It's a rubefacient, bringing blood to the surface. And if the presentation is appropriate, I'll use another rubefacient topically and sometimes internally, like ginger. I've had some success, but I will say it's one of the harder things to fix. There's some other Chinese herbs that are indicated for it, like Hisha Wu, Polygonum multiflora, and oh my God, aromatic, not Wu, it's Wuzu Yu, which is a Vodia fruit seed, is specific for it. Siler root, I believe, and Baiji, which is Tribulus. Whew. Boy, I'm pulling that one out of the cobwebs. I usually go to my books and start researching for vitiligo. I will say that.
Would you add immune modulators there, since it's kind of
immune modulators would be, that is an autoimmune disorder. I don't think I said that. And immune modulators would be super appropriate. And all things immune, besides immune modulators, normalizers, things like mushrooms. But we find that stress aggravates every autoimmune disorder, so it's super appropriate to add nervines, adaptogens in there, without a doubt. But boy, it's a trick treating vitiligo, and usually we see it when it's really, really advanced and like kind of taking over, not when it's like, oh, I think I got a little white spot. It's probably easier to treat it when it's super new, first diagnosed, than not 20 years later. Everything's harder when it's 20 years later, right? Well, if you haven't heard myself, I'm Bob Linde from the Tradition School of Herbal Studies. Renee Prince was not able to join us. She had other things to do down in Miami, although she may be hanging out here. I haven't seen her comment yet, but she might be hanging out in the background there. We are, and tonight we have Trisha, who is the director of the Tradition School of Herbal Studies. We also have acupuncture and herbal therapies. You can find out more about us at traditionsherbschool.com or acuherbals.com if you're more interested in the clinical aspects. We have both Western and Chinese herbal classes here, as well as many standalone and spiritual classes, free and not free. We are online. Everything can be done live and in person or on Zoom if you don't happen to be in the Tampa Bay area, or if you've got a nagging cough, don't come to class. Check us out on YouTube. Follow us there and subscribe so you can get it. We are always producing new videos. This video will be uploaded onto YouTube probably tonight if I'm a little amped up, or tomorrow at the latest. If you're in the Tampa Bay area, please join us at Kavananda, the Bula Cafe in Seminole Heights, Tampa. There we go. If you're interested in the Chinese herbal program, you better get in there soon because we're almost full. And our next, we always do this. I skipped the spiel, but we try to do this the last Friday of every month, whatever the heck that is in October. I will be there. I hope you are too. Bonus if you send in the questions. 29th? That sounds good. Oh, yeah.
Dennis
Please.
asks when the next herbal walk is, and we're planning one for Halloween at
Oh,
1:15 p.m.
Yes, Halloween. It will be free. We're going to do an urban herb walk for about 45 minutes. I'm going to literally run out of the first aid class and come back down here to the clinic at 2520 Central Avenue in St. Petersburg, Florida. And they will be shutting the streets down, so you're going to have to park on one of the side streets on First Avenue, North or South. And we will meet here in the clinic, and we will go find all of the unpeed on herbs that are in our alleys and the streets that are both edible and medicinal, and always a fun one. I love doing the urban herb walks. They're just silly fun. And we will be doing some more soon. I've been looking at some dates in December. We always do one. And don't tell anybody, but on New Year's Day, I always do a free herb walk down on the south side somewhere. So that will be announced another month or so as it gets closer. I think that's reacquiring our access to our traditional medicine and taking responsibility for our health is a great way to start our new year. So always watch for that one. We always get a nice crowd, and we will live stream that one on something. And of course, always check out all of our herb walks. We try to record as many as we can and upload those on YouTube. I'm sure I'll have a free moment here. I'll go do a live stream from Boyd Hill or something. I always love the herb walks there. Thanks for playing, everybody. I appreciate all the great questions. We will see you next month if we don't see you sooner. And make sure you send in your questions ahead of time for next time, because that way I can Google it really fast. No, I'm just kidding. I literally do these off the top of my head. You are just getting the download and purge of information that is somewhere in my brain rattling around. So have a blast. Oh, look at that. We got Argentina on here, rocking it. We literally got an international crowd. We got a bunch of states covered. We got the countries. I love it. And I'll tell you what, I'm jonesing to make it down to South America. I'm going to have to do this South American tour and visit all the folks. Maybe I'll get into TV to do another series of a second season of the Asunción con Bob Linde. So, good night, all. Have a great whatever it is.
Friday.
Yes.
Friday.